Hi Dee. Hello everyone. My name is Harsh Dhaliwal and I'm the chair of the District Student Advisory Council here in SC 57.
Hi, my name is Chris Zimmerman and I'm the vice chair. We would like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded ancestral lands of the Lheidli T'enneh, where we are honored to work, play, live, and learn. We would also like to recognize that School District 57 includes the Simp First Nation and McLeod Lake Indian Band.
We are so grateful that you're joining us today on this guided lesson on anti-racism.
Howdy. Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Marin, and I'm the District Vice Principal of Indigenous Education and the lead of DSAC. This work we are sharing with you today is special. It encompasses not only the demand for anti-racism work here in School District 57, but also the push for creating spaces across all levels where students can be a part of decisions that are made. Sometimes adults forget to include and listen to those that we need to hear from the most. So as we move through this presentation, please be mindful of ways that you can include students and youth in making decisions in whatever role that you have. I'm honored to learn alongside these incredible humans and would like to thank you for joining us here today. Masi, thank you.
All right, so we're going to get right into the content piece. So we're going to start with why. Why did we decide to take on a project about anti-racism in our community? So it was fall of 2020, school had just started, and we had our first DSAC meeting of the year. Well, of course, at the beginning of the year, we didn't really know what we wanted to do, what we wanted to start with. And then Halloween happened and we met after Halloween, and on Halloween there was a blackface incident at one of our schools. And that, along with one of our secondary schools undergoing a name change to an Indigenous name to honor the land, we realized that a lot of people in our community were tone deaf to racism that was going on within our schools, within our community, especially within our classrooms. Us as DSAC, we noticed within our classrooms as well that we were seeing lots of microaggressions and stereotypes, not just overt acts of racism, such as posting online racist things online or doing things like blackface, but it was the little things that really created barriers. And so us as DSAC, we decided that we wanted to tackle racism for our school year, but we wanted to do something that would reach people and not just teach people what racism is, because you can read a textbook and learn what racism is. You can tell anyone what microaggressions and stereotypes are. But of course, in a time where we weren't able to go into classrooms, we wanted to find a way to reach people and teach through the heart. We wanted to impact people, make people want to be better people, not just because they have to, but because they truly want to. And using that, we wanted to involve a process which involved both perpetrators and victims of racism. So Chris is going to explain what we did.
After many discussions, we ultimately decided to do a video. We interviewed alumni and students from each of the secondary schools in Prince George, and it's important to note that the students and alumni we interviewed are people who walk the very halls we do in our schools and go to our schools and our peers, teachers, and friends and families. Through this process, we amassed over 8 hours of footage, and we knew this would be way too much for just one video. So we split the footage into 4 themes: stories and experiences, impacts, hope and allyship, and a film solely for educators. This is what became Raising the Bar, Bystanders Against Racism. This learning series is a teaching tool for students, adults, and community members, and we hope that you will use it in your classrooms.
Hi, my name is Olivia Masich, and to continue off of what Chris and Harsh were saying, we learned a lot. This has been a process that has been over 2 years, and something that we really focused on while we were going through this is to learn how to be anti-racist. So throughout the whole process, we focused on trying to incorporate the First Peoples principles of learning, but particularly 3. Learning involves recognizing the consequences of one's actions. Learning involves generational roles and responsibilities. And learning is embedded in memory, history, and time. These 3 principles are significant due to their acknowledgement of the importance in taking agency and responsibility for our own educational and growth. These are something that is incredibly important to this project. To be a good ally, we need to understand that we have to listen some more, and then take action. We have to listen to the voices of the people who have been impacted by racism, listen to the voices of the victims, and hear what they want us to do, so then we can move forward together as a society. All of the stories, like what Chris said, are coming from people who walk our halls at school. They're people in our community. And that makes them so much more significant and real. This leads us to learning through your heart. This is something that we all went through the last 2 years. And that is something so important because that leads us to having empathy and understanding of one's experience. And to move forward as a society when we're fighting systematic racism, we need to have empathy, we need to have kindness, and we need to care. Learning is different for everybody. We can read something in a textbook that happened over 100 years ago, and while something that happened 100 years ago is still relevant today, it doesn't have the same impact as these stories that have impacted us and we hope will impact you. Everyone learns differently, and understanding that and understanding these stories will be the first step to finding a solution. So, as you watch these videos, as they continue to be introduced, focus on listening and understanding before acting so that true change can be made in our society.
Hi, my name is Brianna Day and I'm a grade 12 at Shasta Kelly Road. And the first video that we're going to be watching is called Stories and Experiences. This is raw footage from alumni, teachers, students, and people of color in our SD 57 community, talking about racism and how they live and deal with it. These experiences show what is happening in our community that are shared by the power of story. It gives us an opportunity to learn from experiences and the meaning within it. We have to listen and be open-minded on how racism affects people. These people that you're going to be listening to are so brave and powerful. I hope you all take many important aspects from this video.
We would like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded ancestral lands of the Lheidli T'enneh. We are honored to be guests and visitors here, where we live, work, and play. This is what can happen when adults step out of the way and students make decisions and design their own learning. This is student agency.
My name is Harsh Dhaliwal and I'm part of the District Student Advisory Council here at SD57 in Prince George, British Columbia. We've all heard stories of racism, whether it's through social media or through the news, but we lack an awareness of its prevalence in our day-to-day life. Through this project, we're able to listen to real-life stories from people in our communities and in our schools. And through this project, we really want to invoke deep listening and impact people through the power of story and through the heart.
I remember it very vividly, actually. So in grade 8, it was my first week, and wait, hold on, can I pause for a second?
Sure.
Am I allowed to say the N-word?
Whatever you're comfortable with, right?
Okay. So in grade 8, the first week, I went to my locker, and I was getting ready for my first class, and I hear the word nigger, multiple times. So I look to my right and I see these two, they obviously weren't in my grade, but grade 12 or 11, these two white boys cornering a black kid and calling him that multiple times.
So when I got to high school, I was in a completely different environment. And I remember when I was in grade 8, there's one scenario that really stands out to me. It was my last day of math class, and I had developed a friendship with a kid in my class who was Middle Eastern. And I remember we were playing a game, I can't even remember what it was, just to celebrate the last day. And he got this other kid out, and the kid yelled at him, "You need to leave this class, you terrorist." I asked him, I was like, should we do something? He was like, "No, there's nothing we can do. This is just what happens." And I was like, oh my God, this is not okay.
I remember like people would call me a coconut because like brown on the outside, white on the inside. And they thought it was funny. I thought it was funny too, but I didn't actually think it was funny. I actually thought it was pretty offensive, but I was just too scared to say anything.
In 8th grade, badminton zones at Dutchess Park, there was some parents sitting beside my mom for a game that I was playing, and they were actually making comments about my mom and me while I was playing, saying how, "Oh yeah, obviously Chinky's gonna get it. She's gonna get it. Oh, whatever, she's gonna win. Because they play ping pong and badminton all the time," right? And I felt horrible because my mom had to hear that. And that's the one person I don't want to have endure that. I would rather myself over her any day.
You know, I haven't been, subject to a lot of racism, obviously, because, the system is built for people like me, not of color. And that's something that needs to change.
Yeah, I think the first time I can really remember feeling different is it's probably in kindergarten and playing on the playground and with some kids. And I remember a lady yelling out, "Don't play with those dirty Indians." Because I always went to my mom and I'm like, what's that supposed to mean? And the hurt and pain in her eyes trying to explain.
I don't think there's probably a week that I go by without being called the N-word or somebody saying something. Just when I'm walking with my kids to the store or going to the park for whatever reason, right?
I just saw myself as somebody who wasn't exactly fitting in with everybody and somebody who had a different skin color.
I think a lot of times it's been like in the hallways, like when you pass by someone and you or a group of people and they're saying certain things and you kind of walk by and it makes you almost uncomfortable in a sense that they're saying that without even having any hesitation, or they're knowing it's wrong, but they feel like it's like, oh no, society has made it seem like it's okay that we can do this.
Yeah, well, the craziest thing, as I said before, I'm an athlete. I played basketball, and in this very gym, when I was in the 10th grade, we were in a city semifinal game, and we were beating that school, and there was an altercation between two players, and one of the players' sisters was super angry, stormed courtside, and then started shouting racial slurs towards my coach, me, my teammates, before ultimately getting kicked out. So that was a pretty crazy experience.
Yeah. Like it can be small or large, but I see it probably a lot in our school district, like even regarding just small jokes that someone might share on their phone to as large as that blackface incident that we had at PGSS.
I think the number one thing that I could tell right away was people like to make jokes. And that's the number one thing that stuck with me throughout high school. And I feel like it is something that doesn't go away.
Particularly, I think it was kind of like senior math kind of courses, and we were there and we were talking about some grade for a test or something like that. And it came up, people were asking around, what did you get on the test? And I told them my score, and somebody said, oh, of course you did well. And I was like, well, it's not that I don't put in effort. Like I still study and I still do all my homework and everything.
Growing up in the track club, there were a lot of people of color in the track, and they would be made fun of for their skin color or the way their eyes were shaped differently.
And for me growing up and seeing everybody else around me
doing the exact same things and it being okay, and then me, just because I have a scarf, just a scarf, that's it. Everything was so big and everything was so wrong that I was doing.
And so what made me different was the way I looked. So I spent a lot of energy trying to not look different, like people weren't going to notice or something, right? I remember being so embarrassed about my culture that like friends would come over and I'd be like, oh, my house smells weird. I'm going to open up the windows. Oh, there's my grandma wearing her traditional clothes. I'm like, hey, grandma, can you beat it?
We've moved here so then I could have that education, and just getting put in right back to the lowest. That was a big struggle, was trying to prove that I can be just as smart, just as academically talented as anybody else here.
Focus and send you live.
Thank you for watching our first film. My name is Avery Brissett, and I'm a grade 12 student at College Heights Secondary. The second video that we are going to watch is Impact. It highlights how experiences of discrimination and racism have left an impact on those within our community. In this video, we hear from both current students in the district and from those who graduated quite a long time ago. Both have been personally impacted by these issues. This shows that this is an ongoing problem that has affected people in the past and continues to affect people today. Even though it may not have been realized at the time, this impact has lasting effects on people's lives.
We would like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded ancestral lands of the Lheidli T'enneh. We are honored to be guests and visitors here, where we live, work, and play. This is what can happen when adults step out of the way and students make decisions and design their own learning. This is student agency.
My name is Harsh Dhaliwal, and I'm part of the District Student Advisory Council here at SD57 in Prince George, British Columbia. We've all heard stories of racism, whether it's through social media or through the news, but we lack an awareness of its prevalence in our day-to-day life. Through this project, we're able to listen to real-life stories from people in our communities and in our schools. And through this project, we really want to invoke deep listening and impact people through the power of story and through the heart.
Even today, I think when a person sees me and they see what I look like, there's an assumption about my background. I grew up with parents who spoke Punjabi at home, but I always answered in English.
I'm quite cautious as who I let into my life because I don't want people to not like me for the way I am. My oldest sister, when she was younger, actually, she learned Japanese as her first language. And because of that, she had some troubles learning when she first started going to school. And therefore, my parents had to tell her that she had to stop speaking Japanese. And therefore, my middle sister and I never got the chance to fully learn and immerse ourselves in our culture.
It was always the balance of having a Western identity and having more of this Indian identity. And it was always trying to balance Like, am I Indian enough? Am I white enough?
First, I was like this. I thought I solved my problems. I was like, okay, I'm listening to them. I'm taking off my scarf. I'm becoming white. I'm becoming normal. And then I started skipping school, and I didn't want to be at school. And then my grades started slipping.
My daughter said to me one day, Mom, I always had this feeling that teachers have low expectation of First Nations kids in the North.
I remember in elementary school, I didn't get very good grades at all, and it didn't feel like I had a lot of support to help me achieve the grades that I had wanted. And it just felt like I was almost expected to get bad grades and that they were just gonna like leave me there. So, yeah.
I never learned my language. I'm picking it up now, but I was purposely not taught it. I talked to my mom about it, and she's like, I don't want you to have an accent because it's already hard enough for you to how you look, and I don't want that struggle. So
it was easier sometimes to just be like everybody else, right? So be more white, whatever that means, in order not to stand out too much.
I was very aware of the stereotype around Black people, so I would try to shift myself to fit into this kind of token Black person narrative to make sure that I don't lose opportunities based off of the color of my skin.
Almost like because of my race, I'm expected to be smarter, or I'm expected to be a higher achiever. Even like from my friends, sometimes I would get comments like, oh, of course you got an A on that test, you're brown.
I loved sport, so I participated in that. There was the assumption that I was going to be good at everything anyways. Many of them didn't want to be on a team with me or didn't want to play with me outside of school because they're like, well, you're going to be better than us anyways, so I don't even want to go there. I'm not like that. So, you know, go find some other people that are like you that you can kind of hang out with. So that was really difficult.
I don't think I felt ashamed necessarily, but I think it's just frustrating at times, you know, to deal with those type of ongoing jokes and those ongoing comments. So not necessarily, I would say, ashamed, but just frustrated to have to deal with those.
A lot of, like, in the classes, just a lot of, like, people joking around mostly, or, like, online, people making comments on people's posts and stuff. Like, if people are trying to speak out against racism, sometimes I find that it gets kind of made fun of.
You know, people understand what other people are going through. I think social media has been great for that. It's also been horrible for it, but I think overall, you know, knowing what it is, what people are going through, hearing the stories of those, you know, and understanding what they go through on a daily basis, it's just not acceptable, and people shouldn't have to go through that.
It's not directed racism towards specific students as much as it is kind of stereotypes about individual students or their race, I guess. Doesn't really translate at all to how well they're going to do in school.
I suppose moving from a small community to a bigger center where we had to go to high school. Plus, I found a lot of racism when I went to the bigger school, just because there was them and us.
Lots of people say that there's so many homeless First Nations people, and they don't know why that is. And it's like, because of the residential schools, it's because of all the families that have been affected. Like, and they just blame it on them for drugs, alcohol, and it's not.
As someone who isn't a person of color, I don't get judged for the lack of melanin in my skin, but other people do, and it makes no sense.
All of the shows I watched had other little white girls in it. Going to the store, I had no issue finding a Barbie doll that looked at me, or just any sort of doll. The American Girl dolls were really popular, and I never had one, but so many of them were blonde-haired, blue-eyed white girls.
I could go to any school, but I just didn't see myself in those roles because I didn't have role models. I can't think of one teacher I had in high school that looked like me.
I felt a lot of shame just looking different, and I wished, you know, I had different hair color or eye color. And
I think any teenager or any kid, you don't want to stand out no matter who you are, right? And so when it's pointed out continually that you're different, it becomes a little bit difficult.
I wouldn't say that I felt ashamed, but I I definitely felt different. Like, I was raised to like be very proud of who I am, but maybe I need to be careful of what I say or what I'm doing because I don't want to stand out for being like who I truly am.
Hi, I'm Temi, and I'm a new member of DSAC. I'm a grade 10 student in College Heights Secondary School. We have 2 questions to guide you in your conversations in class. Question number 1, what is one story that stood out in the video and why? Question number 2, what are some challenges that people of color may face? You have 10 minutes to answer, to discuss the questions in class.
Hi, I'm Kira McKinnon, and I'm a grade 12 student from College Heights Secondary School. After watching the first 2 videos, I'm sure some very strong feelings have arose. I would like you to take a moment to pause and reflect on what you've heard so far. These stories are raw and incredibly hard to hear, and I can almost guarantee that you are feeling uncomfortable. But I'm here to tell you that that discomfort is good. No change comes from comfort, and to move forward as a society, we must face our discomfort with action. Now you may be wondering, how can I help? What can I do to professionally and personally facilitate change in my life and the world around me? That is where our 3rd video comes in. Our 3rd video in the learning series, Hope and Allyship, is used as a tool to help see what change we need to see for the future, the dreams we have for a more inclusive future, and what allyship means to different groups. It's important to note that we ask different groups what they would like to see in allyship and for dreams for the future.
We would like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded ancestral lands of the Lheidli T'enneh. We are honored to be guests and visitors here where we live, work, and play. This is what can happen when adults step out of the way and students make decisions and design their own learning. This is student agency.
My name is Harsh Dhaliwal, and I'm part of the District Student Advisory Council here at SD57 in Prince George, British Columbia. We've all heard stories of racism, whether it's through social media or through the news, but we lack an awareness of its prevalence in our day-to-day life. Through this project, we're able to listen to real-life stories from people in our communities and in our schools. And through this project, we really want to invoke deep listening and impact people through the power of story and through the heart.
Like this year in my social justice class, I did not know much about residential schools, but we had this giant
course about residential schools, and I learned so much more. And there's all these kids need to know what is going on, and I feel like it's so ignored. Like, people just don't talk about it at all. Like, they just push it back like it's not a problem, but it's huge.
In a perfect world, things like racism and sexism and homophobia wouldn't exist, but obviously we don't live in a perfect world.
That people are waking up to these type of things happening in our school district, and they're not okay with it. So going forward, I think we do have hope that things like this will stop.
I think we still have a long way to go. I think that it's been a culmination of hundreds of years of events and things like the civil rights movement in the 60s, and yet we're still seeing things today. Like, it feels like we're going backwards sometimes. We need to continue. We can't let up, and we can't stop fighting the fight against racism.
I think we can definitely do better at kind of combating, especially stereotypes.
I'm not friends with these people. I have seen people call people out for their racism, and on top of that, the Black Lives Matter movement, just seeing how much people care, it was definitely something that really helped me get through everything.
It's okay to celebrate being Italian, Canadian, and Chinese and Irish. That's amazing because it's part of who we are, and I think as Indigenous and First Nations are starting to get that, we need to embrace that as well. That it's a huge part of learning.
The richest part of your life is your culture, and I feel like at the time I felt ashamed of my culture, and now I feel ashamed that I felt shame.
You know, it's okay to look different and just be proud of who you are. I think making changes so that it's not, it doesn't seem like a change, you know? Like, it's almost so that making changes so that all these different cultures seem normal.
I encourage people to really be vocal in times of injustice, because, you know, I heard a quote, and it was, if you choose to be neutral in times of injustice, you've chosen the side of the oppressor. And I think that is a very powerful quote.
Just because you don't have someone to look up to doesn't mean you're less valid. You're valid, and you are appreciated just the way you are.
To think how far we've come. I can turn on the TV and I can see people that look like me, not as a character or as the butt of a joke. And don't make yourself the joke. You don't have to beat them to the punchline. You're not a joke.
Unapologetically be yourself, and I'm not talking about in a negative way, you know, causing a ruckus. I'm saying be yourself.
When we reclaim who we are, and we're able to claim who we become, we're able to understand that we have a lot to give back to society.
You know, personally, myself, I think it's about hearing from other people that are victims on the best way to move forward. I think that the more stories that we hear, the better that we're going to be on the end of it.
I think it's really important for me as a bystander to stand up for people who might not be able to stand up for themselves, or who might be too afraid to.
Everybody, teachers, bystanders, people in high school, all of us equally play a role to produce a positive environment. And as soon as you assume, whether you're a person, a student, a teacher, as soon as you assume what that student is going through, you've made a mistake.
Keep standing up for knowing what's right. If you have a gut feeling or you overhear something and you think, that's not right, to say something. You know, maybe you're wrong about it, but at least your voice was out there and you were heard, and you know that you were doing the right thing.
We don't want to overpower the voices of color, because those are the voices we should be listening to. And I think that it is really important that non-people of color are educated about the harmful impacts of racism and how it can be such a setback.
And if we want change within our schools, we have to look at things that are barriers to our young people.
Like I said, I'm trying to educate myself to move away from that sort of thing, get away from that bias.
have many voices around the table that are different than mine, that don't just resonate or echo my voice, but resonate different things as well.
Youth aren't the future leaders. They are the leaders. And as a leader, my job is to support your visions, your goals.
When we, as First Nations people, can get that together and be strong together, I think that we can move mountains. We can move our kids to a different place in education.
Hi, I'm back with some questions regarding hope and allyship. Question number 1. If you are not a person of color, how can you be of help and allyship? Question number 2. If you are a person of color, how can your friends and classmates help you feel safe and supported? You will have 7 minutes to discuss with your class.
All right, now that we're approaching the end of our live stream, we're going to do a bit of a question and answer period. So we've received a few questions so far, but if you have any more questions, we're going to give you about 2 minutes to put questions in the chat, and we'll be able to answer those for you. Yeah, so we'll read some of our questions out.
First question, what does privilege mean, and how do I know what privilege is?
All right, so privilege is a really good way to frame types of oppression in a way that everyone can understand them. So privilege itself is understanding that there are certain things, are attributes about me that automatically put me ahead of other people in the society, whether that be race, whether that be socioeconomic standards, whether that be your gender, your sexuality. There are things that put you at a different starting line than other people. So for us to all be able to get to the same finish line, we need to be given different supports to get there. White people are going to need less supports than people of color are going to need in our society. And so understanding that privilege is a good way to talk about race, because it helps us see not the things that we aren't given, but the things that we are given, and how we can use those things to help amplify other people's voices.
Question number 2. Can you tell us the difference between not being racist and being a person against racism?
Okay, so believe it or not, there's a huge difference. When you're not being racist, you may not be actively committing racist aggressions, committing microaggressions, saying horrible things, but you're standing by and facilitating and allowing racist behavior and racist actions to happen. You aren't doing anything to stop it. By being actively against racism or anti-racist, You are standing up for people who are being oppressed. You're standing up for our marginalized communities and trying to enact change and prevent racism from going forward. You're making a difference. You're standing up for what you believe in and trying to find a way to help. So don't stand by just by simply not being racist. That's not enough. Stand up.
We had a question come through the chat. What is racism?
What is racism? In the simplest terms that we can define it, racism is the act of oppressing someone because of their race and being systemically challenged because of your race. So when we talk about systemic racism, we're talking about barriers that have been put in place societally and systemically to keep people of color from succeeding. These systemic barriers are typically very colonial, and we are working to dismantle those. But on a personal level as well, racism invokes feelings. It invokes feelings of being less than feeling less than and feeling inferior. And the thing about racism is that the thing about any kind of oppression is that any kind of oppression evokes the same feelings of inferiority. And with racism, that inferiority is felt because of a race.
Another question. What kinds of things should I do if I see racist stuff? I'm only a kid.
Even if you're only a kid, the biggest thing that you can do when you see racism around you is to stand up. Just like what Olivia was saying, by being actively anti-racist, we want to use our voices and make sure that people know why it's wrong. We need to educate the perpetrators and the victims about what's going on and how we can stop it. And, even if that's just telling your teacher what happened, or maybe standing up for your friend, or, just talking about it even. It's just important to stand up and use your voice, even if you're a kid, no matter what age you are.
I would like to add to what Chris said. It's hard to stand up to be anti-racist when you're a kid, especially if you don't know. But one of the biggest things you can do is ask questions. Ask what it means. Ask why this is happening. Talk to the adults in your life, because that involves growth, understanding, and education for both you and your parents or your teachers. And this goes across the board if you're one of our elementary school kids who are watching, or our high school teachers. Never hesitate to ask, because it always provides an opportunity to learn.
Just like Olivia said, I heard someone say this last night. Don't get angry, get curious. Ask questions. Wonder why the things that are happening around you are happening, why people are saying the things that they're saying. Once you have that ability to understand why people are saying the things, we can become better people. We can become better people for ourselves, and we can become better people for the people around us as well.
Question number 3 for Chris. How can we as students become involved in this work?
The biggest thing for any students who want to get involved in really anything in your schools is just speak up and use your voice. Don't be afraid, and go to your principals, go to your teachers. Don't take no for an answer. If they feel like they don't have the time to do it, well, you know what? We do, right? We're students, we're kids, we have tons of energy. Let's just go at it full steam ahead, right?
If it's important enough, they will make the time.
Yeah, you got to jump in with 2 feet. And, adults, they might not seem like it, but they want to listen to you. We have things to say. We are the leaders now. We're not the leaders tomorrow or in some faraway time. It's our time to make change. And for things to happen in our schools, it's necessary for us to be there.
What steps can we take to stop racism before it happens?
What steps can we take to stop racism before it happens? I think The biggest thing for teachers and for classmates as well, we need to build relationships with each other. I think when teachers build relationships with their students, your classroom automatically becomes a much safer space. Right now, in our day and age, racism still exists. It's so adamant, as shown in our videos, it still exists, and we can't always prevent it. But what we can do is we can support each other and we can build relationships with each other, because once we build relationships with each other within the classroom, within our communities, we automatically have more respect for each other. The thing about racism is that people are racist because they want to feel better about themselves and they want to make other people feel worse about themselves. And to prevent racism, that I don't know if that's possible, but what we can do for each other is that we can be there for each other and we can support each other. All right, so I think that brings us to the end of our question and answer period. So we're just gonna do a little wrap up. And we're gonna have the rest of the crew join us. All right. So thank you so much for coming to our live event. There are some messages that we want to leave you with. So the biggest message, of course, raising the bar, bystanders against racism. We got one more. We need you to be actively anti-racist. You can't just be not racist. You can't say, oh, I'm not racist. I've never said anything racist. You need to be anti-racist. You have to understand that not saying anything is not enough. To end these things, we have to create the change. We have to be the change that we want to see. Think about how you're going to do something differently the next time something happens. The next time someone makes a joke or maybe shares a racist post online. What are you going to do the next time someone does this thing? Are you going to say nothing or are you going to speak out? You need to speak out. And after today, the work isn't over after you've watched this. Racism isn't over just because you attended one live session on racism. It's not over. Racism has been happening for centuries. It will continue to happen. But we have to be the change that we want to see. We have to create systemic change. We want to have to create systemic change, and we want to be able to support others. We want to support others because we want to, not because we should.
Missy Cho, and thank you all for coming. This has been an incredible experience for all of us, and we hope that students in every school will now continue to have this work done in each school and every classroom. It's all of our jobs and all our responsibility to make these changes happen. Missy Cho.